Shay Sherilyn Birchwood is a multidisciplinary healer, creating practices and spaces to serve communities in a variety of ways, including crisis intervention, individual and group therapy, community mental health workshops and panels, meditation and yoga, and organizing important socio-cultural events, such as both Montreal and Winnipeg's first ever Dyke Marches. They have worked in, or Che has worked in mental health and social services for the past 15 years and are in the final year of a PhD in psychology with a specialization in clinical research and intervention. Their thesis focuses on improving mental health communication through image-based knowledge mobilization. In clinical work, they meld history, sociology and psychology, giving weight to social determinants of health such as race, gender, ability, and trauma. Please welcome Shay Sherilyn Birchwood.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Vanier. Alan, thank you so much for inviting me again this year. So I have a little PowerPoint. It doesn't have much text on it, it's mostly images. But pull that up there. So it has a little like visual support for what I'm saying. Okay, so as Alan mentioned, I'm doing a PhD in clinical psychology, which basically means that I'm trained both as a clinical psychologist doing therapy and stuff, as well as a researcher. So a big interest for me is what's called social determinants of health. So race, gender, trauma, sexuality, class, those kind of things, and how they impact an individual's mental health and how they have kind of like larger ramifications on society. So a big part of community mental health is intergroup and intragroup dynamics. So intergroup dynamics is one group in interaction with another. And intra-group dynamics is how a group interacts with members of their own group and with themselves. So an individual interaction with themselves. So in the context of Vanier, intergroup would be, for example, students in interaction with teachers or the outside world. And intergroup is about students communicating with other students. So race is just one part of those inter and intra-group dynamics. Gender is another one. But because race and gender are more or less visible, they become very important factors that influence how we interact with each other. So today I'll be focusing on anti-Blackness, but also talking about the intersections of race and gender. Okay. Can you see that? Or is my little chat thing blocking it? I don't know. I hope everyone can see this fully. Okay. So a little cognitive science, just to give a background. Humans are constantly perceiving, understanding, and sorting information. Vision accounts for about 80% of our neuronal firing when our eyes are open. So a major way we can sort and categorize things are by what we see. This applies to seeing other people as well, not just objects. So we sort people by the traits they have in common or different than us. We create in-groups, people who are similar to us, and outgroups, people who are different than us based on various traits. So cognitively, humans love binaries as they are the simplest way to categorize things. We tend to automatically sort things into binaries or poles. So good, bad, hot, cold, black, white, up, down. That's why people will affirm that there's only two sexes, even when there's decades of research that says different. So most people characterize their in-group or whichever group is dominant as good, right, or best, and their out-groups as bad or inferior. That's done to protect your sense of self. So if you characterize your in-group as bad, it would mean that you as an individual within that group is also bad. So that emotion, that thought is kind of intolerable in our perfectionist kind of shame-based society. So the badness is put on the other. Okay, along with sorting information, we compare the person we're seeing with what we already know, what we've already seen. This is where stereotypes and representation matters. If you've been surrounded by people who look like you and your only information on people in your outgroups comes from media, family, or other biased sources, your reference points for people in your outgroups will be very limited. This leads to what's called the outgroup homogeneity bias. Or in simpler terms, everyone who's different than me is the same. So you kind of like group all the people, say all Black people together as one monolith, or all women together. Like all women do this, all women are like this. It's the men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing. That, I don't know if people remember that from the 90s. So basically, a group gets represented by your first or closest interaction with a member of that group. They become an archetype by which all other people in that group get lumped in with. Unfortunately, non-Black people's first interactions with Blackness is usually through media, where we're predominantly represented as violent or aggressive, hypersexual, as a caretaker, or as inhumanly strong and resilient. A lot of sports movies are like that, or just like a disproportionate amount of strength that's not really realistic. So today I'll go through some of those stereotypes, explore where they come from, and present the impact they have on Black people and society at large. So, but first I would like to say that anti-Blackness and white supremacy are not the same thing. Of course, one upholds the other, and certain processes like colorism are present in both, but anyone can be anti-Black, even people of color, even Black people. When Black people are anti-Black, that's called internalized racism. And that's a product of consuming biased media representations of Blackness. Also, what I'm presenting will be upsetting. Discussing the horrific, painful parts of history and how they continue to this day, how they inhabit your mind and body is naturally upsetting. If it isn't upsetting, there's a problem. Most racial bias is unconscious. People behave in automatic, socially conditioned ways, often without awareness of their motivations and impact. So the intention of this presentation is to make biases conscious, so they can be confronted and eliminated. As I explore the research and history, it will likely evoke negative thoughts and feelings in you. Things like anger, sadness, disbelief or denial, guilt and shame are common when discussing racism. I invite you to be curious about those feelings. You can ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where in my body is that emotion? What statement triggered that feeling? When have I experienced this before? Curiosity is an antidote to shame, and shame is one of the biggest blockers in behavior change. So take the time after this presentation to fully explore what comes up for you and create ways that you can put this information into action by changing your behavior. So one of the stereotypes against Black people are that we are somehow impervious to pain. This goes with the inhumanly strong. So there's the expression, Black don't crack. I'm sure most people have heard of that. So that's a manifestation of that myth. So currently it is often used to describe how Black people don't age as quickly or as intensely as non-Black people, but the roots of the phrase are in slavery. It was created to justify the violent mistreatment of Black people, that you can do anything you want to us, put us in the most extreme conditions, and we'll survive. Along with the phrase came racial myths about Black people to explain our survival. Myths like that we have thicker skin, that we don't feel pain, or that we're stronger or more resilient than the average human. So though the enslavement of Africans in North America is over, those myths live on. A glaring example of this is in medicine. Research shows that more than half of medical students actually believe that Black people have thicker skin and that we have less pain receptors. This is patently false, obviously, but doctors, who are probably the most educated people in our society, some of the most educated people, believe them. So this leads to differential treatment of Black patients by white doctors. So here we have, this is a still from a YouTube video. So a Black woman in the United States hid a recorder in her hair, actually, when she was having surgery. And she was able to capture her doctors or surgeons making inappropriate comments about her. So referring to her as precious, commenting on her physique, her belly button, saying that she's a handful, saying that she's annoying, things like that. So this will probably be familiar for people who are aware of the case of Joyce Echelon, is that these things that often happen to Black people, these statistics that I'll say throughout the presentation about Black people tend to often apply to the Indigenous populations of Canada as well. Okay. So Black patients, this is from research, Black patients are 22% more likely to receive no pain medication compared to white patients. Additionally, Black people are often denied care altogether. So here's a screenshot from an article. This happened just in January.